Right now, you are living through the birth and rapid evolution of a new kind of intelligence, AI.
Rival tech luminaries who have already reshaped our world are in an arms race. Recent polls suggest 70 to 90% of all CEOs plan to invest heavily in AI behind them.
The numbers are staggering, amounting to hundreds of billions of dollars in the next few years. Governments and regulators are stepping in as well, setting the stage for a global paradigm shift.
But have you stopped to understand what AI really is? Are you prepared for a world where AI will impact your job, your health, your relationships, and maybe even the nature of your humanity?
I'm Charlie Stack.
I am Lax Srinivasan. We believe your success, our success, depends on us starting to have a different set of conversations about AI.
Join us as we get to know our new neighbor. Welcome to the machine.
So in my day job, I spend a lot of time talking to C-suite leaders about AI, and I get asked the same questions over and over. How should I structure my org? What kind of leader do I need? What are the use cases that companies like mine are working on? Here's the thing, these are good questions, but I have to say, if you're really all in on AI, these are not the most important questions. And here's why. AI is going to change the way people work at least as dramatically as the factory or the assembly line. So from where I stand, leaders need to cut deeper. If you recognize AI as a seismic shift, you have to be asking, what should people even be doing? How should they get their work done? And how do they work as teams? Does the traditional org chart even still make sense? It turns out that most great leaders realize this, but for all the info available on training models, leveraging cloud platforms, creating cute artwork with ChatGPT, the real problem is that there isn't yet a lot of great advice on how to lead people through the AI revolution. This is why I'm so thankful to have my friend Keith Ferrazzi on the show today to talk about a vision for leadership in the age of AI. If you don't know Keith, I'm surprised, but I'll introduce him anyway. He's a renowned executive coach, keynote speaker, investor, author. Through his company, Ferrazzi Greenlight, he spent more than 20 years coaching Fortune 500 companies, unicorn startups, even governments. Keith is obsessed with team transformation. And as a coach, he challenges the way teams work to achieve breakthrough results through more connection and more collaboration across silos. I'm going to put him on your reading list because you can go check out his columns in Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, Fortune, Fast Company. Sure, I missed some. He's also a #1 New York Times bestselling author, familiar title like the one probably many of you know, Never Eat Alone. His latest book, Never Lead Alone, is not actually a book about AI, but as I read it, it reads like the playbook for how to lead in the AI future, moving from leadership to teamship. We're going to provide a link to that in the show notes, but let's dive in from there. Keith, welcome to the machine. It's great to have you.
Dude, I'm blushing. What a great introduction. Thank you.
Is that the best intro you've ever gotten?
It's pretty damn good. I don't know. I'm gonna go back and tell my team to pull this down and transcribe it. Yeah, it's great. Nice to be here with you and Lux.
Great to have you, Keith.
So Keith, I'm going to leave this open to you a little bit because it is factual that, for most of your career, I wouldn't have looked at you and said, oh, Keith, this is the AI guy. But I also happen to know that you're spending a lot of your time right now with your clients, with your friends, talking about leadership in the age of AI, specifically talking about how do we deliver AI use cases? What's going on here? What are you seeing? How did you get pulled into this world of AI?
Well, about 8 years ago, a dear friend of mine, a guy named Peter Diamandis, who is a great futurist. He wrote a book called Abundance. He founded Singularity University and X Prize. He wrote a book, The Future is Faster Than You Think. And he started saying things on stage, and I co-facilitate his conferences. Sort of he's the futurist and I'm the how do you make it work in your teams. He started saying things on stage like, if your business isn't an AI business, within, he was a little bit aggressive, within 5 years, you won't be in business. And obviously, I respect and care for him and I pay attention to him. And I started diving in, started talking to friends of mine like Reid Hoffman and paying attention to where he was investing. Um, I actually, over time, I joined a venture capital firm as a venture partner so that I can be right at the epicenter of AI. It's a company called Lightspeed, um, and it's one of the largest global VCs in the world. All of that to be said, let me just land this. What I care about is high performing teams. Every team today is has a major new teammate called AI. I would be radically negligent if I didn't fully understand that teammate and how high performing teams worked with, leveraged, and took advantage of their new teammate.
Yeah,
Mm,
so
very.
it's the furthering of your lifelong passion with, human psychology and team psychology.
It's interesting. I have been so frustrated with the world of work and the world of business and leaders for so many years because most teams are mediocre and they haven't woken up to some basic truisms about high performing teams. For instance, on a scale of 0 to 5, the average team is in the ones relative to their ability to challenge each other when it's risky to do so. That has nothing to do with technology. That's just pure mediocrity of a mediocre, low performing team. And so the fact that we've allowed that to be true is frustrating to me. Then you move over and you realize that we've had collaborative software like Microsoft Teams and Google Workstack and all of these things. We've had this stuff for decades, and still leaders are dragging people into shitty old school meetings where people are bored and distracted. And we've been doing that for decades. And we have found in our research only 15% of teams are beginning to scratch the surface and practice what we call 21st century collaboration, which is collaborating asynchronously, etc. So now I'm frustrated by the fact that we're ignoring this massive capacity to level up in our collaboration and our teaming based on not using technology. Now, those two things still remain to be true. And now we've added a third layer with AI. We're just layering on shit that people are ignoring dealing with that should be dealing with. And now we've got probably one of the most massive disruptions in capitalism and organizations, which is AI. And so I don't know where to start. Do we start with the mediocrity of teaming behaviors? Do we start with the fact that people are still collaborating ineffectively? Or do we begin to address this massively? Maybe what's going to happen is this massive new AI is going to wipe clean the slate of everything so that we can start from scratch. Lax, what are you
Yeah.
thinking of?
I agree with you on kind of the mediocrity. Is you know, the teams have enough problems, right? In the sense without AI. So does it make a mediocre team even worse with AI? Like,
Great question.
let me go this way, right? High performing teams will absorb any technology. AI is kind of a game changer. I get it. They have a higher likelihood of absorbing something, but that's not where the unlock is going to be. So how do you deal with that? Give us an example of a mediocre team plus AI. How does that happen?
Well, I think we're looking at two different time frames here, right?
Mm,
The time frame of right now, where a team and a leader has an opportunity to get ahead of the curve or be subjected to it and victim to it over the next 5 years, right?
mm-hmm.
All I'm saying is most companies and most teams are stepping up and well prepared to be victims, not getting ahead of the curve, right?
Yeah.
And so, if let me just spin ahead for a second. Let me give a whimsical fantasy, which isn't whimsical and it isn't a fantasy. It's real. But I do believe that the fact that most companies today work in silos, where this, let's take a look at if we're re-engineering supply chain, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're a supply chain leader, you're not going to re-engineer supply chain
Mm-hmm.
without a single team looking at it that includes sales and forecasting, right? That includes the finance organization, that of course includes the IT organization because they're bringing radical new tools with AI that you don't know anything about as a supply chain leader, right? And you're bringing HR if they had any idea of change management and what's the future of human capital and role redefinition during this. And by the way, all of this needs a re-engineering of workflows, meaning it's not about how do I make each role that I currently have better with AI. How do I wipe out half the roles that I have and re-engineer it with AI, right?
Yep.
So that's the team. Now, I believe that there are some companies I know right now that are getting ahead of the curve on just that point, right? And
Yep.
they are taking billions, 20% of their supply chain costs out with very little impact on quality and efficacy.
And Keith, so in that context, what do you think is the most misconception about this today from what you see?
Well, what I was about to make was the first one is who's my team? The reality is we need to span up and redefine team has nothing to do with org charts. That's the biggest transformation. And you're absolutely right in that team doesn't, in the olden days, mediocre performing teams thought of themselves in silos. And if that's the way you're going to show up today, you're going to miss the boat in terms of the potential of AI.
So let's start to pressure test this a little bit. You know, I think I'm going to forget the name of the guy, but I think the modern org chart was invented in like the 1800s in Scotland or something, right?
I thought it was Frederick Taylor, but yes, I mean, I remember who you're talking about. Yeah.
And you know, and one of the things I think that's been so successful about the sort of modern top-down hierarchical org chart is it makes it very visually easy to understand lines of accountability, right? Things that fall under me. You know, this is why as I talk to organizations, we have all these conversations about like solid line, dotted line, right? It's really about accountability. Talk about, this is one of the things from your book that I think is really ahead of its time. And is so important because in an AI age, exactly to your point, you know, information is only really maximized as an asset when it is unlocked, right? It's able to kind of travel across those teams where you're able to like, you know, connect something that's happening in marketing with something that's happening in finance or, you know, procurement. How do leaders think about that shift, that, you know, supply chain shift? With an accountability framework around it that makes sense.
Well, I think the first thing is let's ignore the org chart for a second. Truly ignore the org chart. It was designed as a caretaking medium for people. But today, I think teams are formed around KPIs. So for any goal you have, any metric you're trying to achieve, you ask the question, who's the team around that? And once you get teams aligned to key strategic priorities and goals and metrics, then now you're swimming. The problem is that most HR systems are engineered around org charts because there's a historical belief that that was the most efficient way to do it. But we need new technology to support being a team. Who gives feedback in an annual performance review? That's such a bullshit idea. The reality is we should be giving constant feedback among a group of people working to re-engineer the supply chain, and not only giving feedback to an individual, but giving feedback to where we are with our last meeting that we did, where we are with the flow of the work that we're doing, et cetera. We should be commenting on that organically every day among a group of people working together. And that's actually the feedback medium, right? And by the way, it's not hierarchical. You don't get your feedback from your boss. You get your feedback from your peers working on this critical project. Now, I would be in 6 teams. Like I'm in the team around this re-engineering of supply chain. I'm in the team around, you know, the leveling up of our customer experience because I happen to have a horse in the race for that one as well, et cetera. And all of those were to actually think of themselves and orchestrate as a team. That's the biggest shift that needs to happen first and foremost. And then each of those teams need to have new social contracts. I work with companies sometimes where the field sales organization points their fingers up at headquarters and vilifies them, probably with worse language than they used for their competition. And that's because they have a mindset that they are the team of sales and other is this group in headquarters, when in reality, you have a team that is interdependent with the two of them around customer experience or customer service or new client acquisition. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so damn basic. And we've been struggling with that for years. That's why I started Ferrazzi Greenlight many years ago, because I was a chief marketing officer. And sometimes at Starwood, I had both jobs, heads of sales and chief marketing officer. And I realized how efficient those two functions could be if they were one. And when the times were that they weren't, I realized how inefficient go-to-market strategy was when sales and marketing didn't work together. So I started Ferrazzi Greenlight to start to unleash value in the interdependencies of an organization. Back in those days, marketing and sales, but now more fluidly.
And
And
Keith,
I think, sorry,
yeah, and
Lex.
I was going to say, Keith. So I think what you said makes sense. The question is, what prevents companies from kind of doing that? Even like when you have gone in, there've been instances of like, for example, I'll give you an example, right? We do all around AI. When we go in, you can't push on a string, right? If the companies don't have a burning platform for change, we see no matter how big or small the companies are, the AI journey gets very choppy. So
Yeah.
what's kind of a necessary and sufficient condition for that kind of re-engineering to take place
Yeah.
that you have
So
seen?
if I were walking into a company today and we were going to re-engineer a particular part of the organization with AI, the first thing that I would do is I would identify those 6 individuals that I believe need to be the team. I would get that group together and I would create an esprit de corps of that group of 6 individuals to go take a damn hill together, to do something that's never been done, to achieve what's unachievable, to be one of the best in the industry possible. I would get a group of 6 individuals from wherever the hell they sit organizationally to agree that that group was going to do something that they'll look back on for the rest of their careers and be proud of, right? So if I can get that, now I've formed a team, right? Next step is I want to start to agree how we will work together. I call it a social contract. Some people call it culture. You can have a culture of an organization, but a team can have its own culture. And that's what I wrote the book, Never Lead Alone for. There are a series of shifts that team needs to make. The first thing is we will never talk behind each other's back. We will challenge each other openly in the room when it's risky to do so, right? And that's fine. But the first thing I will do when we all agree that, yes, we'll do that, is I will put a practice on the table and I'll give them an experience of what it's like when we do that. So I will get them to taste and experience challenging each other, because what, to your point, we're working against the momentum of hundreds of years of history of how organizations work. Right now, people have in their mindset, I'm a salesperson, I'm a marketing person, we will bump our heads and we are other, when in reality we are us. And if I get that group to experience what it's like to take a risk, challenge each other, live through it, see the value of it, and then actually be like, damn, that's a better social contract than the bullshit talking behind each other's back was. So I need, as a coach, I need to put them in the middle of a difficult experience they would never naturally migrate to and make them have a great experience when their fantasy was that they would have had a horrific experience. And they're like, shit, we can live this way.
Lax, our research friend Jeremiah Lee, who helped build Spencer Stewart's culture methodology. One of my favorite quotes of his was, "Culture is the residue of success." That's what it is. What you're describing is, first you got to get people to be successful doing things a new way.
Yeah.
Then you build culture.
I mean, I breed everything around practices.
Yeah.
And my book is organized around 10 big shifts. Those are concepts. We need to move from conflict avoidance to candor. We need to redefine teams as not around org charts. But then I give practices that I've observed, and the practices are where people bring it to life. And so it's just about new practices, new workflows. So for instance, you look at Agile. The practice of Agile, it opened up the possibility of faster software development than was previously available to people. And it changed culture. Anybody practicing Agile, it was the practices that they practiced, the process and practices, but that changed culture. Culture is the agreements that people have on how we work with each other. And
Yeah.
I believe that process and practice changes culture. That's why there was an article I wrote in Fortune not long ago where I said, culture change is not that tough. I'm constantly able to change culture at the snap of a finger by introducing new practices. And it absolutely, as I say to folks, you don't think your way to a new way of acting. You act your
Yeah.
way to a new way of thinking.
So
I
Keith,
I like that one.
yeah, Keith, how, um, one of my friend used to say, you know, behavior complex, motivation simple. So I just want to go back to your example of the first thing you do in a company is like get those 6 people together in a team and give them that experience.
The motivation, to your
What
point.
is what is the motivation? Are you giving them a higher purpose? Like,
Just winning.
why are they even?
Look,
Why are they opting in?
yeah, Charlie participated in a group that I facilitate. He came to New York, and it's a group of CIOs, it's a group of business executives, heads of HR, etc. I call it RIC, RIC, Radical Innovators Collaborative. People want to go big. They want to go higher. Most people are fearful and they stay in their boxes because they don't quite have a roadmap, or they don't have the guide, or they don't have the Sherpa. I'm trying to bring a group of folks to Sherpa each other there, right? So if you create a collective and you give them the hope and possibility that we could get somewhere extraordinary, but we can only get there together. That's what I do as a coach, right? My job as a coach is to make this team constantly realize what it can do for and with each other. How do you get up the hill? I think of myself, and frankly, I think of in the future leaders. Leaders should be Sherpas, right? Sherpas are taking a herd of cats and trying to get these species, organisms up a hill together. And that to me is the real special sauce.
You can imagine from that commentary, a lot of other ways that the organization, the sort of support structures around these teams might be helpful in accelerating some of these journeys.
Sure.
And frankly, in simple ways. I mean, I start to think about HR policy and compensation policy, where it's always been my observation that in most organizations, the downside risk of making a mistake is you're fired. The upside risk might be I make 5% more next year. Which door are you going to choose in terms of how I'm motivating you? So incentivizing different types of risk-taking behavior is an example. But I don't necessarily want to go there because I know we need to land the plane with you, Keith. And what I'm thinking about right now is how does all this relate back right now to this AI moment, right? Like the stuff that you're talking about, you've been thinking about this for a lifetime, even before AI is a topic people were talking about. I think these things are all true whether or not we have AI. I just happen to believe that because of AI, they're even more important right now. Like it's jet fuel on the importance here. What's going on here?
Well, a couple of things. If you're going to get the value of AI faster than your competitors, you have to start bringing this kind of a teamship mindset to the re-engineering efforts ahead of you. The re-engineering of supply chain are going to require an end-to-end look at supply chain, not looking at it from the perspective of finance and from the perspective of supply chain and from the perspective of forecasting. It's an end-to-end experience. So you're 100% right. But what's going to happen is this stuff's going to be done around us and to us. Some of your competition is going to get it before you do. They'll have a competitive advantage. This stuff is going to get ingrained into the enterprise software that we're bringing on board. And all of a sudden we're going to wake up and we're not going to have call centers anymore. And we're going to have to deal with how do we deal with that disruption? So look, this is a 5-year journey where during this next 5 years, there's going to be a few people who get out ahead by using this methodology of rethinking leadership through teamship. and then there's going to be a bunch of litter on the Fortune 500 pavement of those who are struggling to keep up with the disruption that's happening to them.
Yeah.
If,
Could I,
if we,
Keith? Could I ask
yeah,
you a
plus,
question on? I want to go back. So if there is a if there is a CEO or some executive listening to this, you talked about the first step of getting those 6 people to opt in, and you show them the experience. How do you scale this? I can understand you coaching that team. Is it a positive virus that spreads in the organization? Can you talk a little bit about a journey in companies? Like how does this thing scale? Because I see this, by the way, a lot of companies do great in getting AI in pockets because of what you said, the subcultures and the teams. Somehow it happens. It's not because of the leaders coming down, but then they get stuck in that AI in pockets. So how do you make this thing scale? What you just said.
I believe that there have been very few times when we've had a radical reengineering of behaviors in the workplace. I mentioned agile a bit ago. In certain pockets like software, there was a reengineering of assumptions of how we behave using agile. Prior to that, Six Sigma in the manufacturing world. In the manufacturing world, and if you look at both of those, what really drove the transformation was not necessarily an edict from a leader or training courses. It was the black belt of Six Sigma. It was it was the AI coach. It was the individual in the fabric of the organization that bought into it and wanted to be out ahead of the curve and ended up coaching their peers. I think we need black belts of AI today. And I think that I wrote a piece in Forbes on this recently, where I literally call for that. And I give an example of how if you have a role in your organization, like an administrative assistant, let's say, and you say to all your admins, how many of you are using, let's use generative AI for now, how many of you are using generative AI to re-engineer your role as an admin? If you do, would you please write up what you're doing and send it into us? So typically from that, you'll get like 5% of the population will write something up. Fine. They have the potential of being your black belts. Of those, half of them aren't doing anything really interesting. Of those who you read and you're like, oh, that's clever, bring them together. Now we've got a small percentage of the population, could be 15 people, could be 5 for that matter, but you've got this group of individuals, and what you say to them is, you're all doing something clever. Over the next month, coach each other to be extraordinary, reinventing your role with AI. And then what I want you to do at the end of the month is I want you to stand up in front of your peers, the hundreds of other admins in the company or whatever it is, and I want you to demonstrate the top 5 things that anybody could do to be a world-class user of AI and begin to be not a black belt, but a yellow belt. And you ask people to raise their hands, who wants to be a yellow belt? And you take these 5 individuals and have them start coaching these simple practices and get people up to yellow belt. And then of those yellow belts, who wants to go to brown belt? Those individuals should start to incubate new ideas themselves and innovators. I think at the end of the day, what we need are movements. Now, I do have to say that it's a little interesting because in the future, I don't think we'll have admins. The role won't exist, right? And so you could be arguing that these people, I guarantee you, they're not re-engineering themselves out of a role, because someone's going to come along with a software package that is going to absolutely eliminate the role anyway. An agent is going to re-engineer the role anyway. But what is going to happen is when that agent re-engineers the role, we're going to be looking around to find, okay, if I have to let 90% of the people in this role go, those 10% that will be saved were the people who were the leaders in the re-engineering of the role in the first place.
So Keith, that was great. So it looks like the way to make it scale, from if I heard you right, is really you're saying it needs to happen kind of from the edges, where people these coaches it becomes a movement, right? It happens in a small team, then they coach each other, and then it becomes a movement. That's the only way it scales in the organization, not top down.
Yeah,
Did I get that right?
That's exactly what's going to change the culture of the organization and get the people onboarded to be that next generation of human that will be working in extraordinary ways with our AI partners and our teams.
Keith, we could go on all day, but I know we need to let you go. This was a really fun combo, one of the best we've had. Thank you so much for the time, and I hope everybody was able to take something away here today.
Great.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you, Keith.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Take
Cheers.
care.
Thanks for listening to Welcome to the Machine.
To join the conversation, visit us on welcometothemachine-ai.com.
Special thanks to Spencer Stewart, the Return on AI Institute, and our fantastic production team, Trey, Jojo, and John, for helping bring WTTM to life.
Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe.
See you next time.